there's all this other data that's being collected by the device. So like anything, if cyclists listen to this, anything that you see on your head unit, like if you have electronic shifting and you have it connected to your head unit so you can see where your gears are during the ride, that's actually also being collected and stored in the fit file. And there's, as far as I know, no other product out there that's really like keying into something like that electronic shifting besides the Ride with Dave product.
I'd say it's a great differentiator between doing a project like this, wherein in a matter of months, we've gone from just a lot of ideas to iterating and reiterating on top of those iterations extremely quickly, and doing that not only in a sustainable pace, but in a pace that you want to keep pushing. To use a bike analogy, but it's almost like the last few months in trying to make Dave a reality has felt like just a big bike race. And since I like biking, that's been a lot of fun. So I'd say, yeah, passion behind wanting to make a product that use has been a big differentiator in making the pace at which we're working sustainable, alongside, of course, the help from agentic coding.
The agent can make a decision of, oh, I see these signals in the data. Let me see if there's a relationship between those three things. So it's a much more flexible system when it comes to the variants of data that could potentially exist in these types of files and signals. So I started racing when I was 13. I raced all the way through my 20s, various levels, but professionally for a time in road, mountain, and cyclocross. And I did end up with a couple national championships and a handful of other medals at national championship events across all those disciplines. And now I'm more a master's cyclist recreationally, support my master's team with some coaching advice and practical matters sort of stuff. And then my junior cycling team here in town as well. Tried to use these files before, having gone down that path of applying for like a Garmin SDK membership a handful, maybe a decade ago. It was like a $10,000 a year program. And so like I have followed and tracked these kinds of things for a long amount of time. So when Dave Mosier and I were visiting in a Slack room and he was like, hey, yeah, I'm like working with these files called fit files. I was like, I know what those are.
So aside from the fact that we're doing a lot of this work with the help of agentic tools, some other factors are that we all have a pretty good knowledge of the domain that we're working in, that being cycling. And that helps us really focus in on not just the tools we're creating for this cycling specific agent, but it also helps us iterate quickly, maybe more quickly than if I, for example, wasn't familiar with the cycling world. It helps me look at data differently. It helps me figure out what these raw data files that we often work with through Garmin and Wahoo.
I think one of the things that was most unique about the product and most unique about their initial stance was this ability to surface some of these more individual and unique data points for the benefit of the individual versus the benefit of a platform. And so I think that was a neat and unique way to go about the product roadmap.
It's allowed for a lot more collaboration in real time. And what I mean by that is our CEO, Ricky, has, through these AI tools, he can quickly iterate prototypes that align with his vision. And that allows for me to collaborate with him. I haven't been able to before, given that prototypes that he creates much more fleshed out than they were prior to access to these agentic tools.
They had discovered a lot of data in these fit files that was clearly there and makes sense in hindsight, that was evident, but they're not exposed in other platforms that are using this data, things like Strava or Training Peaks or whatever, because if you think about it, if you go from a traditional platform environment, what you're looking for is across all of these different devices, what is the standard set of things that everybody's going to have to build products on top of? So cycling is a big sport, but it's small enough for it to be relatively fragmented, especially when it comes to like the technology landscape. And so part of the thing that's unique is that there are a couple big players in the space that have very specific control access protocols for you to be able to even interact with their products. So I think like those sorts of just intuitions about, think of them as like the domain and range of probable values and cycling data is pretty helpful, as well as just understanding who the players are, where they fit, what kinds of athletes even or people might be using different kinds of products within that cycling space, right? And bringing in like the difference between, say, urban riding and training for an Ironman or something, the tools and communities, platforms that people are on would be very different between those two communities.
As for myself, I like to consider myself an urban cyclist. I am big into the fixed gear bike scene, as well as the more urban cycling. From an urban cycling perspective, that could be more seen in our other feature, that is the postcards feature, where users can upload a fit file, or if they're connected to Garmin, choose a ride that they've done in the past and create a postcard of their ride, which is essentially an image of them with Dave on their ride, and that has their ride stats on it alongside weather and route they took.
If you hit the reverse button on our timeline, say 8 months, RAG was all the rage, of course, last fall, certainly last summer. And the intuition was that if you were going to build agents that had some sort of memory or some sort of ability to recall or aggregate or collect, like what you would really want is some sort of retrieval augmented graph to be able to categorize this information correctly and be able to retrieve it. There's hundreds of devices out there that generate the kinds of files and data that you could leverage from this. You have two main sources from them, though. You have the raw fit file, which is something you might be able to download from a device or get pushed from like the Garmin integration to your processing pipeline. Or maybe you fetch it from an API like the Strava API or something. So you get, that's the thing Strava was built on initially, was like the GPS information and being able to map specific segments of the road or of the trail or whatever and create a leaderboard. And so you have this data signal that's on the basis of that, which is all the GPS data, so you can build those kinds of things. And so other people have, on an ad hoc basis, for example, overlaid weather models on top of the GPS file and given the ability to see like how weather was during the ride or whatever, like headwind, tailwind, that kind of thing. Both Ricky and Wayne are, as we talked about, very AI forward. So it was a really neat opportunity to come off some other clients and try some stuff in a greenfield space and experiment with some hunches and intuitions that I had about how to structure projects for success with AI, but also have that really deep domain context of experience in cycling to really help guide some of those integrations and decisions and have a strong hunch about how the data could differ between different head units and fit files and that kind of stuff, and what we might be looking for.
Always of the mindset of creating products around how the user would interact with it first and building on top of that. So it makes sense that you would go to that example of creating for the user instead of the platform, because that is how they operate. And I think, again, is a big differentiator in this product as opposed to others.